What is going on Purpose Investor Nation? I am Eric, your host, and this is show number 44.
I'll say this again and again. The main difference of where I am now and where I got started is because I minded my business. It's because I constantly improved my mindset and my skill set. And from that, it has opened up so many doors for me.
Welcome to the On Purpose Investor Podcast with your host Eric and Tiffany Vogel. We've spent several hard years building a rental property portfolio so we can have more time with our family and live our ideal life. Now, finding your path can be difficult, so we're here to guide you along the way with lessons, tips, and tricks to design and implement your dream life. Now, sit back, turn up the volume, smash that follow button, and get ready for this episode of the On Purpose Investor. What's going on, everybody, and welcome to show number 44, where today we have an outstanding investor from New Orleans, Louisiana, Courtney Fricke. Is that correct, Courtney?
That is correct, man.
Awesome. Welcome to the show. She is going to be bringing some awesome information about what she does in New Orleans and probably across the Southeast. She is a long-term buy and hold real estate investor. Without any further ado, welcome to the show, Courtney.
Eric, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We had the pleasure of meeting about a year and a half ago, I think it was. We sat beside each other at Gary Johnston's real estate seminar where he was talking about financial freedom principles. Love that course and just love the community that surrounds people that go to Gary's courses. So I was doing like military training during the day and only came kind of in the evening. But you sat next to my wife, Tiffany, and she told me, she said, Eric, Courtney is a go-getter. She is doing huge things down in Louisiana. You got to get her on your podcast show. You got to reach out to her. She's got a story to tell. So that's what we're doing here today. We're going to let Courtney tell her story and what she's doing. And you might see that we're using a new streaming service today and super excited to be doing so. You'll see the links to Courtney's in Instagram and my Instagram down here at the bottom of the screen. So if at any point you're like, listen, I'm tired of listening to this podcast and I want to go check out what Courtney's doing, you can do that. Stop it, hit stop, and go check out that Instagram. All right, Courtney, let's get this show started. What do you invest in, Courtney?
Yeah, so honestly, I've done a lot of different things over the years. So I'm predominantly in the single family, long-term buy and hold rental space right now. But I have touched a variety. I've done everything from low end to high end properties. I've done everything from trailers to mobile home parks to RV parks to small multifamily development, wholesaling, flipping, buying and selling creatively. I have run the gamut trying to find my identity as an investor. And I think I've finally, almost 10 years into this, I've finally found my path forward.
There you go. And how is that little shift that you've been, it's probably a big shift. How has that shift been? How has it been to, change gears here and there?
Yeah. So I think for me, I used to always say, well, I don't have a niche, right? I don't have a specialty. All I really cared was, is it a deal or not? How can I make money? But the reality is that although that was fun and it has provided me a lot of opportunities, what it lacked was that clarity to really go the full gamut in one area. And so it's the Jill of many trades, a master of none. I didn't want to do that, right? So I really started, I think for me, the biggest part of the shift was I wanted proof of concept. I wanted to kind of taste test to see, what did I like? What did I not like? Okay. And so I kept coming back to, single families for long-term rentals.
Yeah. And there's a lot of seasoned investors out there that I call mentors that would say the best investment anyone could ever make is buy and hold single family rentals. I know Leon would say that absolutely all day, every day. And you work pretty closely with Leon. For those that are just joining the podcast on this show, go back to the earlier season. We had Leon Johnston on our podcast and spoke in great depth about what he invests in and how he does his investing in Mississippi. And Courtney, you've been working with Leon for a while now, right?
I met Leon, it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I've got, a handful of deals underneath my belt. I'm rock and rolling. At that point, I had started building a team. I'm rock and rolling. And meeting Leon changed my life as an investor.
Yeah.
He definitely was that fork in the road for me. Often said that he's, been one of the biggest influences. And he's one that when I came across Leon, I resonated so highly with him that I literally, the first day I met him at a crawfish boil, so he lives an
Mhm.
hour from me, was at his house at a crawfish boil. I stayed there all day. And then he goes, hey, you want to come back tomorrow to come listen to me do a lease up with a brand new tenant? I literally had to walk to the end of his driveway to get cell phone service to be able to call my team and say, clear my schedule. I'm coming back up here an hour away to come sit down, because something about Leon resonated with me.
Mhm.
And I'm so thankful that, a huge part of that, yes, we do a lot now. We co-coach and co-teach. And I mean, I run a RIA in the New Orleans area. He's coming to be the guest speaker this month for our RIA. I'm going to interview him there. We do a lot, and I have the pleasure of doing that.
Yeah.
Just, it's one of those things that I'm thankful for him.
Absolutely. And I had the pleasure of meeting him about 4 or 5 years ago on a cruise, him and his wife. And that was the Generations of Wealth or
Yep.
Captains of the Deal cruise is that
Yep.
that I was on. And just when you first meet a guy like Leon, all you got to do is turn your ears on and close your mouth and just soak it up.
Yep.
He has a way of speaking that just goes smoothly right into your brain and then makes you go into this collision course of I need to stop whatever I was doing and start listening to him and start doing what he's telling me to do. And
Right.
I love that you're working with him and Adam as well, and what y'all are doing down there in the what do you call that area?
Yeah.
Louisiana.
So I live in Louisiana. They both live in Mississippi, an
Mhm.
hour from me. And so we're really South Louisiana, South Mississippi,
Right on. So
Gulf
I
Coast.
just I love what y'all are doing down there. I can't wait to come and be a part of some of that. I do have a brother-in-law that lives in the New Orleans downtown area. So if ever we're
Awesome.
visiting in New Orleans, we're gonna absolutely meet up and hopefully coincide it with your RIA meeting. For those of you that don't know what RIAs are, it's Real Estate Investors Association. These are meetups where you can go to learn from seasoned investors, and it's just a great community to surround yourself with. If you don't have a single rental property and you're interested in being a real estate investor, the first step you need to do is be a part of a community. You need to start surrounding yourself with those that are talking the language and that are doing the things. Because unless you start immersing yourself in that environment, you will only wish to be a real estate investor. You will never become that real estate investor. A little side note there for what RIAs are. And I've actually never been to your RIA. Have been to several in the Atlanta area and Alabama area, but looking forward to coming to yours, Courtney.
Sure thing, man. Absolutely would love to have you.
So, Courtney, where do you invest? Is it only in the New Orleans area? Can you tell us a little bit about your area?
Sure thing. So I'm born and raised in the New Orleans area. So
Mhm.
I started off in my backyard.
Yeah.
But New Orleans is, although it's a known city, it's not a very large city. Plus, we're hurricane prone.
Yeah.
So I I wanted to, after a while, I said, hey, I started doing volume. So I needed to be able to basically go to other markets. So I'm in what's called in the greater New Orleans area. I split that into two. So basically in the city of New Orleans, but then also in the like surrounding suburbs. And so
Okay.
those are, I started off in the suburbs, then I went into the city to be able to expand. And then I also invest in South Mississippi. So like pretty much the Mississippi Gulf Coast, all the way up to like the Hattiesburg area where Adam and Leon live,
Hmm.
just because I'm out there so much.
Yeah.
And then I just added a fourth area, which is the Baton Rouge market. So LSU is based out of Baton Rouge, and it's the state capital, and
Mhm.
all of them are within an hour from my home, give or take. So this year I'm adding Baton Rouge.
Right on. I I used to date a girl that lived in Baton Rouge, and my wife likes to
I'm
joke with
sorry.
me. She's like, "Why are you going?" When we go down to New Orleans, she's always like, "You want to go across the Pontchartrain and go see your old girlfriend?"
That's funny.
Like, maybe
That's
not.
all.
Let's leave that where it is. I'll take this opportunity to say, "Go Dogs, go Braves, and everything Georgia." So we'll leave that there.
I'll let you have this on your podcast.
There we go. And lastly, how did you get started, Courtney? What's your beginning story? What was it like?
Sure. So my background's in the nonprofit world, and so When I moved back into the country from working overseas in the nonprofit sector, I literally stumbled into a job that was in the real estate industry. And more than that, it was what happened at that job that completely changed basically my trajectory.
Yeah.
So when I got back, the job that I stumbled into was I was a property manager for an apartment complex like company that owns many throughout the US.
Okay.
But this was their one marina. But it's more so, it's not necessarily just the job and the training, it was the situation. Because day one, when I took the job, I took it as the assistant manager. And like I asked the guy, it came from a referral. The guy who I was replacing, I knew him. And he was like, the downside is the manager that you're going to be assisting has cancer and he's from New York. So he's a prick. And so he's like, you need to help him when he has his days where he gets chemo. And so I kid you not, on the very first day that I took the job, someone from the corporate like regional team came in to do my HR paperwork. And I watched his face go white when he got the phone call that the guy who the manager was in chemo passed away my very first day on the job. Wow. And he literally looked at me and said, that was supposed to be your training, because he's like, I only work with the apartments. Here's the marina. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? So I get thrown into that. Okay. Then without a lot of support, it was kind of like, hey, we're here to help, but we don't know how to help you.
Yeah.
Like, how do you evict a boat? They're like, we don't know, figure it out. But on top of that, when I took that job, it was 40% occupied. It was a 105 slip marina. Well, it was a 98 slip marina, 40% occupied, and 1-star reviews on all the boating sites. And so I just took the job, and, my parents always kind of taught me to leave a place better than you left it.
Absolutely.
And it was one of those things where I was bored. So I would read every file in the filing cabinets, talk to every vendor and say, hey, what did you last do here? What do you know? I talked to the current tenants. Hey, talk to me. What do you like? What do you not like? And they just gave me the freedom. And I just said, hey, maybe I can make this place better. And within 2 years, I took it from a 98 unit marina to 105 units. I added additional units because there's just some dead space on the docks. I was like, hey, can you give me the expense allowance to buy and add? They're like, yes, we will. And I grew it within the first 2 years to 100% occupied, those additional slips, and then 5-star reviews on all the sites that mattered. And it got a lot of corporate attention. Like the president from California flew out and he was like, who the heck are you? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just bored. And I want to, see this place, overachiever in the past, things like that. But like, I had no training in real estate. I just was good at talking with people and, giving people attention and good service, I guess, just like as far as like, hey, how was your stay?
Yeah.
I was 24, 25 years old at that time. And I was having these big questions. I just moved from overseas. I had no money. I was living at home. I felt like the broke millennial, living with their parents. But I said, I don't know what the next step is for me.
Yeah.
And I was asking some of those big questions in life. And I had 2 tenants that I spent a lot of time with, because once I got it 100% full, well, I had a lot of downtime. So I really then, these 2 tenants really opened up my eyes. One of them was a full-time landlord with over 40 rental properties. And the other one had just retired himself at 50 from the oil and gas industry because he was a business owner on the side. And so they taught me a lot during that time, but very specifically, the business owner guy said, Courtney, you don't know what you just did for this business. You took a failing asset and turned it around. And I realized that corporate got very excited because they had this failing asset that now, they put it up for sale immediately because they were like, you just turned this thing around for us without us. But my income never rose. I never got like a bump in my salary, things like that. They eventually, maybe a year or 2 in, they finally had promoted me from assistant to the main manager, and I barely got a pay raise. And that's when the landlord had been leaving me a lot of books. And one of them was a Kiyosaki book. And it was the idea of, the cash flow quadrant. You have to mind your own business. I was minding my boss's business by just, doing my job. And I made them a lot of money doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then I realized there was no trickle to me.
Yeah.
And that is when I had those big questions I was asking started turning to studying. And that's when I got turned on to real estate thanks to one of those tenants and some of the books he was leaving me. And it was during that time I bought my first property, and I made more on that one property than I was making on my salary. And I just was like, I'll quit right now. How do I do it again? Because it was just one of those things where I was like, I didn't want to go work for the man or specifically the company, and I didn't think that there was really a lot in it for me to go perform well for others. And I said, the business guy said, Courtney, if you can go this was really pivotal for me. He said, Courtney, you don't understand what you just did for this company. If you can ever find a way to do it for yourself, you will become very wealthy. So yeah, that's how I got started. It was really from a job in the industry that opened my eyes. And then I started with a live-in flip, and my eyes got opened up to the equity I tapped into with that. And the rest is, I don't want to say the rest is history, but it has been a fun road since.
Right. And collectively, how many years have you been actively investing?
9 years. 9 plus, yeah.
And over the course of those 9 years, you have over and over and over seen how minding your business is, without a doubt, the best investment you can make.
Look, absolutely. I'll say this again and again. The main difference of where I am now and where I got started is because I minded my business. It's because I constantly improved my mindset and my skill set. And from that, it has opened up so many doors for me.
Right. And for those of you that are listening that are like, well, I don't have that opportunity to go flip a marina for someone else, to learn all these tricks or to learn all these skills, or maybe you just saying, well, I'm kind of stuck in my job and I don't really have the ability to get out. Courtney, you have been on this journey of doing creative deal structures and being able to communicate with potential sellers and finding houses and all of this stuff. Do y'all have any type of training that y'all do to help people that might feel stuck to learn how to creatively structure deals?
Yeah, so that is something. And look, I hear a lot of people say that, like, hey, no, I'm limited by my environment. Look, at the end of the day, you got to take a skill set from wherever you're at. Maybe it's just learning to talk to people or whatnot, because otherwise that could have just been a job for me, right? But as far as learning wise goes, so Leon and his son Adam and I, we kicked off last year basically a group coaching where the idea is we want to keep it affordable. It's a weekly live call. It's a private Facebook group where people can post questions and kind of interact. But the live call has a training plus live Q&A with one of us teachers or multiple of us. And the idea is to treat it like a sounding board. Sure, there's a ton of education, but most people need a good sounding board in their life to be able to say, hey, this is the deal I'm working on. Can you give me some ideas for my next step? Or, hey, does this sound like a deal? Things like that. So obviously all three of us are creative real estate investors, but we have three very vastly different ways that we've gotten to where we're at and whatnot. Obviously, Leon's been doing this since 1975. Just a tad bit more than me.
Yeah.
So that's something that we have next weekend. We've got a weekend class that we're doing. So we're looking at doing maybe one or two of those a year as well, mostly as of right now, the New Orleans and Mississippi markets where people can come in for the weekend. But ultimately, because we're a big fan of that, it's like, look, you got to get around, you got to learn. And especially if you want to be a creative real estate investor, I always say you got to get around creative real estate investors because you can be around other investors, but if they're not creative real estate investors, it feels like we're talking Chinese to you when we start talking.
Yeah, because I mean, there are so many different veins of real estate investors. You have those that are real estate investors, but they are turnkey investors. They don't know anything about creatively structuring a deal or how to communicate with a seller or kitchen table talks or subject twos or anything like that. They don't know that language because they're buying as a turnkey. They're buying from the MLS and they buy it and then they make it a rental. And that comes from those people that have those tools necessary to buy like that. The creative investor, the creative deal structuring investor usually streams from, the idea of finding great value and being able to buy at a great value. And I believe truly and deeply that those that are creative deal structuring investors, when they are based on that creative side, they're more or less trying to solve problems than they are trying to get a great deal. Because when you can help enough other people reach their goals, and I know you've heard Leon say this enough, when you help enough other people reach their goals, it's going to help you reach yours. So you got to have that help mentality first. And then what will come to fruition are the things you're striving to get as well. But you got to help people. It's a problem solving business. And those that are creative deal structures are problem solving focused. That is their first step.
1000%. Actually, our group is called Helpers Not Hagglers, because it's that idea that a lot of people think in order to get a really great deal, you have to go steal the shirt off of someone's back. Mm-hmm. You've got to, basically has to be a win-lose. I cannot tell you, look, so the house I'm standing in right now, I bought this house subject to the existing loan. Mm-hmm. I still talk to this seller and I check it, we check in. I'm, hey, how's it going, man? Look, after a sale, if people are ashamed to talk to a seller after the deal wasn't done right. Yeah. Right. And so, no, absolutely win-win, solving problems. And the bigger the problem you can solve, the more opportunity there is for a reward.
Yeah. In order to solve really big problems, you got to have a really big toolbox of strategies that come with creative deal structuring. And, it's a very big toolbox for you to need to have. And there are a lot of great educators across the country that are teaching these creative strategies. Some of the people that I respect the most, that I have learned the most creative deal structuring from are folks like Bill Cook, Pete Fortunato. Let's see. Danny Williams he's the RIA host in my area, and he's been a great mentor to us. And Leon Johnston. These are folks that you want to be surrounded by. And I try to say it on every podcast episode. Sometimes I don't have the opportunity to say it, but cashflowdepot.com is an insane investment that you should make right now. If you don't know what Cashflow Depot is, you need to go Google that and get you a lifetime subscription, because there are just a myriad of videos on there from Jack Miller, who was, I consider, the best creative deal structurer that ever lived. And just go and watch videos on Jack Miller and become a modern day Millerite, as I like to say, and go just soak up that knowledge.
Yeah. Look, Eric, you speak my language. So as you guys can tell, I like to read, but I very specifically, I have a thing for the old school guys. Mm-hmm. A lot of the ones you just mentioned are what I respectfully call the gray-haired guys who have been doing this since the 60s and 70s. I'll never meet Jack Miller, who passed away in 2009, mm-hmm. But I'm an avid student of his. I literally have 3 binders over here of his and some of his books. John Schaub, Pete. So I was just talking to Pete last week. I go and I spend 5, 6, 7 times a year with Pete, because he's been, apart from Leon, Pete's been the biggest influence on my life as an investor. Mm-hmm. And I'm a huge fan. So I have this on my desk right now. This is a magazine, and it's from April of 1981. And it's kind of like they have just different articles in there type of magazine. Mm-hmm. And I'm going through and reading it. Jack Miller wrote an article in it. And look, not all of it is applicable today. I mean, I'm reading an article right now on timeshares. I mean, we don't really do that anymore. Yeah. But it is more so the principles. And one of the biggest things that I love about creative real estate investors, generally getting around them, it's they're hey, I want to provide a solution. Mm-hmm. But there's this old school way of like, hey, I'm here to help. And let's structure a deal where multiple people benefit. And it can be the seller, the buyer. It could be, financial friends who lend to you on the deal or partner with you or various things like that. And I have absolutely loved stumbling into that community and that way of thought, because it has, again, changed the way that I do real estate. So I'm a big mm-hmm. fan of all those guys that you mentioned.
Yeah. And, the good thing is that their teachings are memorialized in a way that we can still consume them. And if you're out there saying, well, there's no RIAs around me, or I don't do Facebook, or I can't do XYZ. There's one thing that majority of Americans have, and that is access to the internet, and the access to not everything, but a lot of things that Jack Miller taught. His full seminars are in that Cash Flow Depot, and just go in there and start learning. Usually the only roadblock that is truly in the way of people achieving their dream life, and if that includes real estate investing, no matter what people are doing, the only true roadblock in people's lives is themselves. And if, people got to get out of their own way, they got to start sacrificing, they got to start studying, they got to get out of their comfort zone, they got to get real comfortable being uncomfortable. And that is just a big thing that I think that majority of people that try to become investors, they just say, oh, I want to go, start up 3 Airbnbs and call it a day and be rich. Or I want to, go flip 3 or 4 houses a year and add $200,000 to my salary and just call it a day. The thing is if you're not living it and constantly learning and getting better and putting yourself outside of your comfort zone, you're likely not going to grow as much as you wish you would grow, or make as much money as you wish you would make. At the end of the day, this business is not a get rich quick scheme. It is not quick by any means, but it will last a very, very long time.
Look, absolutely, man. You're 100% correct with that. And I think, so as a RIA owner, these investor meetups, I've been hosting one in my area since 2018. And we tallied up, we've had a few thousand people come through the doors of the meetups over those years. And it has been a huge case study for me, because I've been at every single one of them. And it's like, I've met all these people who are bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, who want to get started in real estate investing, but why are so many of them not there today, right? Or I go have lunch with a real estate broker who's been a broker for 20 years. Who said, I've been wanting to invest since day one. What's the difference, right? And I think a lot of it comes down to is, if you think you can, if you think you can't, you're right. Absolutely. As the saying goes, and a huge part of that is really the effort tied to it and the right expectations. Because I do get a lot of people who are like, oh, I'm going to go attend 3 meetings and then boom, my bank account will magically explode into having money. Like, the reality is I think that's the downfall, where many people are, they're sold a lie that it is that get rich quick, that it is easy. Anyone can do it is absolutely true. Yeah. And yes, you can build wealth, but most people don't like the price you have to pay to get there.
That's right. And I'm still waiting for my bank account to be like really, really big. The net worth has gone up because of, buying low and holding. If you just hold real estate long enough, your net worth will grow. I like to say I'm the poorest millionaire I know. That's because I drive a 25-year-old truck. And I don't really need a new one. It still works. But, there's still people out there that are, barely making ends meet, and they got a car payment of $1,000 a month. The priorities are just not necessarily in line with what their dreams or aspirations are. They're always trying to keep up with the Joneses. They're always trying to have the newest, baddest next thing. I appreciate you sharing that about the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed folks that come into your meetings, and they just never seem to get out of their own way. All right.
Far too common.
It is. It absolutely is. And I go to meetings and see the same thing. And people come up to me and say, hey, I want you to coach me, or I want you to be my mentor, or I want you to do these things. And, I usually give them homework assignment, and I say, hey, go listen to my podcast, go read my book, go read these 4 other books, and then come back to me with questions. And when you come back to me with questions that you need help with, I'll be happy to help you with those questions. Yeah. And I have not had someone come back to me yet.
Yeah. So. And honestly, that's the big reason why with Adam and Leon, we took the approach of a group coaching that's more like, yes, it's education based, but it is more of a sounding board. Like, hey, go do. And your biggest thing you're gonna get from us is that being able to ask us about deals within the group, things like that, or during the live Q&A. Because at the end of the day, so many people we don't offer one-on-one mentorship, because ultimately most people, it's so hard for people to do that one-on-one mentorship from what you just said. Yeah. Most people aren't going to put in the work. So we say, look, people are going to get the most out of this if they go put the work and they have the sounding board to be able to help and help them as they're out there putting in action, because we can't, they're putting in the efforts. We can't do it for them.
Man, amen to that. You can lead a horse to water.
Absolutely.
I love those colloquialisms. That's a hard word. Anyways,
Yeah.
let's move on, Courtney. So when you first got started about working at that marina, and was it that they sold that place and you barely got a promotion? Was that your biggest motivation when you first got started?
No, actually, it was that quarter life crisis I was having. It was this idea of, I didn't want to trust the government for my retirement. Like I was asking the big questions of, okay, I go do this for 40 years and then what, right? Yeah. I'm just sitting there. I'm like, okay, I'm obviously not going to have a pension with this company. They didn't even give me a retirement account with my salary. So it was like I was very underpaid for, they got a great steal on me for that job. But it was one of those things I was just like, sure, I could go seek out someone and, get a job with retirement match or maybe a pension, but then what? What I didn't want was to have to depend on the government or an employer or whatever for my today or my future. Mm-hmm. And a big part of that was looking at the marina. I saw so many people. I say it's like I got to see different classes of people. I got to see the people who were just like living in a boat that was, barely floating so they could have cheap rent, right? Mm-hmm. I had the people who worked 80 hours a week and had a boat because they reached some sort of, social, milestone because they now have a boat. But those would be the boats that would sink on us because they would never come and maintain them because they never used them, and then you had the people who were either retired, wealthy, whatever. And it was really interesting to see the different ones. And I said, okay, what do I want for myself? Do I want to barely be able to make ends meet, to be living on a boat that's like really not livable? Do I want to go work my life away and every fun thing in my life is, I'm just there for shows, but it's falling apart. My life's falling apart, right? Or do I want what some of these other people had, which was freedom? And ultimately what I wanted that freedom and that peace. Yeah. The peace that, hey, the money was there, was continuously there. And I wanted the freedom of time. And as I looked at them, I was like, obviously, and so I just started asking some of them, what did you do to get here? And as I asked those questions, so that is where a lot of my purpose was behind. I wanted that independence, that freedom, that peace, and I didn't want to have to depend an employer, the government, someone else. And so that was really my main driver.
Amen to that. And people need to start, in my opinion, and I don't want to hop on this soapbox too hard, but you got to start being aware of what's making you happy, what's letting you down, what is motivating you, what is driving you. A lot of people are ghost walking and sleepwalking through their lives. And they wake up and go to work on Monday, ready for the weekend already. And they're just hoping that at the end of 30, 35, 40 years, that they won't have to do that. And the sad reality is the majority of people that think they're going to have enough to retire when they reach 60 or 65, the reality is they're going to have to go back to work because people are living longer and they're investing far less than they ever have before. If you are loving your job and you're just putting money into the 401k, my biggest encouragement to you is give more to your 401k. You're going to need more money than you think you do. And you're probably going to live longer than you think you will. I wish people would wake up.
That looking at those three I say classes, but, types of tenants within the marina. I mean, look around in the people in your life. All I was being observant, right? Yeah. I cannot tell you how many people were there at the marina who were of a certain age on a fixed income who would come into my office so stressed because I remember I had this one woman, her husband passed away. He didn't have any type of will, and she co-owned this sailboat with her two sons, and she couldn't sell it or her house or her husband's truck because they didn't properly estate plan. And she's now being bled to death each month because she has this, marina slip rent. She's got this truck note. She's got all these things. And it's just all those situations forced me to do some, and not everyone takes this opportunity, but it forced me to do some self-reflection. Like, what's going to change my path from going something similar? What do I have to do different to not end up in something like that where, I'm on a fixed income at a, later age or whatever that may be.
Yeah.
And it really takes personal responsibility is
Yeah.
what it ultimately comes down, is that someone else, instead of relying on someone else doing it for me. And so you're right, add to that 401k, find ways to not just contribute, but to grow it. So my significant other is in a very good W-2. And so what we're doing is we're taking their, like either their yearly bonus or their 401k. There's some other ones that we're opening, and they're starting to include them on my deals and saying, hey, let's, lend, especially as a creative real estate investor, let's have them lend, 15,000, 30,000 on a deal, and let's find ways to grow it.
Yeah, and you can take that 15, 30 grand or how little or how much, and you can wrap that with other types of money, and you can grow your stuff and their stuff at a rate that the stock market would never be able to give them.
Yep.
And that's just some terminology, that wrapping for profits idea. That's just some terminology out of the creative, deal structuring ideologies, is figuring out, ways to creatively finance something. Because it's not just deal structuring. There's also the deal funding, and there's also creative tenant finding. There's creative, house structure. There's all kinds of creative things out there. It's not just black and white.
Creatively grow your retirement.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're interested in doing something like that, I recommend you Googling Dykes Boddiford, and just seeing all the things that he has to offer in his teachings. I think that website is Assets 101. So you'll want to check out Dykes Boddiford material out there on self-directed 401ks or self-directed IRAs, and then also how to structure your business in LLCs and trusts and stuff like that. Dykes is one of the best when it comes to that.
Absolutely. I was just looking. I have his book right over here. I just bought it. And so I think it's called the Solo 401k or something like that.
That's an excellent read.
Yeah, I was looking for it if I could find it.
Now, I will say this. I did not read that book. My wife read that book, and Tiffany is just a absolute beast when it comes to reading and understanding the details within stuff like that. She actually set up our solo 401k, and she is actively investing it and growing it more than we ever would have grown when we were working W-2s. So, Courtney, we're going to keep moving on. Don't want to run out of time before we get to everything. But when you first got started, I love your motivation story. And I love hearing how you got into that first property. I want to know, when you first got started, did you have a detailed vision of how your investing career would go, or a roadmap is what we call it?
I didn't. And I often say that was probably one of my biggest mistakes. So that very first deal, I literally I didn't want to live at home and I didn't want to go throw money away at rent. So I had these things that I didn't want to do, but what I didn't have was a really good plan of what I wanted to do. Right. Yeah. And then the second deal I did, I bought it off of Craigslist for $20,000, and gotta love the house. It was a 1-bedroom, 1-bath house with a trailer on the property, but we ended up having to tear down the trailer. I renovated the house, and I was going to keep it as a rental. But the problem was my skill set was so low. Basically, I had bought that first property with cash. For my very first property was a condo. I bought it for $40,100, put $5,000, and I used the Home Depot credit cards and to buy the supplies. Renovated 90+% of it myself by guidance of some other people. So I'm 45,000 in, and it was worth 85 because I had paid cash for it. I got a home equity line of credit because I still had that job. And so before I quit that job, I made sure I had that line of credit secured, but it was a $60,000 line of credit. And my point here in sharing that is that second deal that I did, I was all in for like $50-something thousand, like $58,000. And so all of my money was tied up in this one property. And basically I just made like every mistake in the book. Like I renovated a 1-1 house is not very desirable. It ended up being in a flood zone. The seller said it was in a good one. I didn't trust but verify. It ended up being in a bad one. It was not in a desirable neighborhood. I made it the best house in the neighborhood. Like I took a property, a small house that had termite damage, and it was the size of like a plate, ended up being every wall I had to touch from the termite damage. I made every mistake. I literally got into it and I was like, oh, I'll just keep it as a rental. But then I didn't make a plan for like all of my money being tied up in this one property. I didn't know what to do next.
Right.
And so, I didn't. And I ended up selling that property at a loss just to get that money freed up and to be able to say, okay, I learned my lesson. Let me learn the lesson quickly and get a little bit clear on what I needed. I'll just say this, over the years, I've had to get clear at that roadmap because when I thought I was clear, a lot of times I wasn't.
Yeah. Tiffany likes to call it Lakaya U, the Streets University. There are two types of seminars people can go to. That's the one on the streets or the one that you pay to go to and learn a strategy. So my point in asking, did you have that roadmap is to ask you, if you did strategically plan, I'm going to be a single family rental investor, or I'm going to be an Airbnb, or I'm going to be this, that, do you think that would have steered you away from that mistake? But I mean, I know that mistake has paid dividends over the years because you learned so much. I bet you learned so much on that. But would that roadmap have helped you to avoid that?
Yeah. And honestly, that has become one of the biggest things I recommend people to get. Like, hey, learn from my mistake. I took too long to get clarity. Mm-hmm. And so, and don't get me wrong, I have done a lot of deals. I have, done many things over the years, made money. But there's something to be said about having that clarity. A lot of times I say, what happened to me was, like I said, I'm going to do real estate. But then, so I get into that second deal and thinking I'm going to keep it as a rental, but I really didn't run good numbers on it. And then I ended up flipping it, which if you don't plan to flip something and you flip it on the back end, again, you might lose money like I did.
Right.
But it's one of those things where that project ended up just being a distraction for me, right? Like I wasted 9 months on that property because I didn't know where I wanted to really go with clarity. And so a lot of times I liken it to going to the airport and saying, hey, I want to go to Europe. Well, that doesn't book you a flight because that's way too broad. That doesn't tell you what to pack for what type of weather, how to book where to book your stay at a hotel or an Airbnb, or what type of food to expect. It doesn't give you any sort of clarity on all those details. And so when people say, I want to invest in real estate, it's just the same thing. It doesn't give you any clarity to build out those action steps you need. And so until I got that clarity, I mean, I made some damage because I had a broad area. Like I got some stuff done, but a lot of it was by luck. And I found my way forward, and I forced my way through some things that I didn't. I consider myself a recovering flipper and wholesaler. I still relapse sometimes, but like I forced myself through years of that. And that really wasn't what I was wanting to do in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. I love the analogy you used, and it's so true. We just did a first iteration of our course, the Dream Life University, where we're teaching people how to build a strategic roadmap to get to their dream life. And I love about the airplane. If you allow me to do it, I'm going to make that part of my content. I don't know if you have that copyrighted or not.
I don't. You're welcome to just give credit. I've shared it.
I'll give you credit.
It's just because one of those things where I tell people all the time, I'm like, look, it's the same thing when people say I want to invest in real estate. I'm like, man, that's like so vague. And how can we allude to that vagueness, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That is so true. All right, Courtney, our next question. When you first got started, we're going to be talking mindset for a little bit, and we're going to be talking scarcity and abundance about mindset when it comes to time and when it comes to money. So let's first talk about time and your mindset on time and scarcity and abundance with that framework around it.
I grew up between the South, some religious context, and the nonprofit world. I think I grew up in the sense of it takes a team. Mm-hmm. It takes a village. I don't want to say I've never struggled with scarcity because I definitely have. But from very early on, that very second property, I mean, I had found some people in bigger pockets, and I was like, hey, everyone, come over to my property. Let's talk. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. Like that very first property. I mean, I think I had so many people over to that condo to say, hey, my brother-in-law showed me how to lay flooring, things like that. So I think from very on, I grasped that I needed other people to be able to help. me figure this out. And so I think one of the ways that with scarcity, though, that it shows up is other people's successes,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so just because someone, you know, Eric, you doing well, you know, you and your wife winning does not dim my chance of winning in any way. And I think people have to, you know, there's a lot of things that if you get in this business, you have to realize what are those mental blocks you have.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, there's been a handful that I've had, and you have to address them, because if you don't, then it's a block that keeps you stuck.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people are afraid to have an abundance mindset, whether they know it or not, because when you're scarce with your time and your money, usually you're limiting your ability to grow. You're limiting your ability to learn. When you're abundant with your time and time, especially like you're abundant with that, you start to think more clearly on, well, my time is worth a lot, and I don't need to waste my time trying to learn all this, and I don't need to be too prideful to ask for help. So I'm going to be abundant with my mindset on time and money, and I'm going to hire someone to show me how to do it, or I'm going to hire someone to do it completely. And by being abundant mindset and not scarce, so when you think scarcely, you think, oh, there's a limited resource, I cannot give too much of it away, I've got to hold on to it because I don't know when it's going to, when it's going to refill, or if it ever will refill. And then, on the other side, thinking abundantly, you're not worried about the pot running out. You're not worried about running out of money or running out of time. Your hands are open. You're willing to receive and give help, and money and time and whatever you need to give. So, people often ask me, like, what do you exactly mean by scarcity versus abundance? And I like to think of it as it's a holistic thing. When you're afraid to give something, no matter what it is, you're being scarce. When you are freely open to allowing things to come and go, you're being abundant. Yeah. And that abundant mindset on no matter what you do is going to help you grow, and it's going to help you help other people. And it's just going to help you solve problems, and it's going to help you to live a better life by helping other people live better lives.
Look, yeah. I see it all too often. I mean, selfishly, one of the reasons I started the real estate investor meetup was because there wasn't really a consistent one in my area. Or if they had one, it was just constant, like a sales pitch. And so I wanted one where we could go and talk shop. And so that's one of the reasons I started the investor meetup, was because I wanted that. I wanted to be able to go and meet with other people who were doing what I was doing in my market, to be able to learn from them, to be able to like share ideas, have that group think, that mastermind like Napoleon Hill talk about. And the reality here is too many people are an island. And so, like I said, I'm thankful from some of my background kind of opening me to that, of like, hey, I mean, that nonprofit world was all about giving my time and efforts without really, like I had to invest a lot of that. There wasn't a lot of financial reward or this, that, or the other. I learned very quickly through those backgrounds. So I'm thankful for it, because they taught me the power of having mentors or seeking people out to learn from them, or, the community part. But a big part of that is, as a REIA owner, I see so many people who are an island and who are just like, I'm going to figure this out on my own. I'm going to do this myself. I have gotten so much further by opening myself up to learning from other people, doing deals with other people, various things like that. And obviously doing it right.
Yeah. And when you work with other people, you're often sacrificing part of the pie to do that. You're giving away equity sometimes, or you're giving away cash flow, or sometimes you might be giving away the tax benefits. But, that leads us into sacrifices needed to make it big. And sometimes, I mean, I fully believe when you're building a real estate business and you are going in it with someone else, and like you're doing half pie deals together, or you're, leveraging their hard money or whatever it may be, right, you're going to have to sacrifice something. Now, outside of the creative deal structuring and outside of the funding, what kind of sacrifices have you had to make? Like when you first got started, to what are you still sacrificing today?
Here is something that a lot of people I don't think talk about is, and okay, so Jack Miller, we referenced earlier, he had some newsletters that he did from the 70s until the early 2000s. One of them, he said this one line that I've referenced time and time again, which he said that basically real estate investing, specifically in the single family space, is a game of inches. And it's this idea that it's not get rich quick, right?
Yeah.
And so one of my biggest things, I started off flipping and wholesaling, and I did a lot of volume in that. But then ultimately I got to this point where I was like, I was earning a salary. So the big shift I made was to, okay, I wanted to start building wealth.
Yeah.
An issue I did was I went from the flipping and wholesaling, which is all active income, think salary, and rentals, which are passive, it's like retirement money. I went, full swing from one to the other.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I did early on, especially with my rental portfolios, is I have not taken from the cash flow. I wanted them, so I always say I want them to grow up to be grown children that don't need to come to the bank of mom to pay for the vacancies and repairs and, to stand on their own, right?
Right.
Before I depend on them, I want them to be, independent, right?
Yeah.
So I don't take any money from my rental companies, right? And so it's like one of those things where it's like, it's very difficult for some people because they're like, oh, let me just quit my job and do this full time. Well, I did that. And so what have I had to do? I've had to flip or wholesale here and there to get active income because I'm not pulling from my rental portfolios. I didn't start buying rentals till 2019.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where I was like, all right. And I still don't feel like I'm ready to like start pulling from them. And so it's one of those things where people don't realize is that there's a financial sacrifice where it's like, someone's like, man, you must be making a ton of money. It's that idea of that broke millionaire. I'm like, I keep my salary low. Like I've kept my living expenses very low. But here's the thing is there is that snowball compound effect, not only of the money, not only of the values of the properties, all those things, but also my efforts, right? And then boom, overnight I looked and I was like, man, these portfolios have grown. There is a level that most people don't sacrifice, number one, the today money of like your salary, like what are you paying yourself? And I think that's one of the biggest things I had to figure out. Man, I hustled on the side, I'd buy a furnished house from a seller, sell on Facebook Marketplace and whatnot. And that money would, be put into the bank account to live off of, right? Or, the various things like that. I mean, at the end of the day, I'd still flip, I'd still wholesale here and there to basically build out a salary for myself. But I just kept my living expenses so low because I was committed to this idea that long term, this is how you build wealth. I think what most of the time is not talked about is that in the interim, it's going to take some sacrifice of, hey, I can't always go on the vacations like everyone else. I can't always, do this, do that, maybe have the older vehicle, maybe, go thrifting for stuff rather than brand new at the store or whatever. And I think that's what a lot of people, they struggle to see that it's not just this is a magic pill that's going to solve everything in your life, is that this is a two-way street. In order for real estate to give to you, you have to give to it.
Yeah. Amen to that. I love the way you framed that. And hopefully the listeners hear it the way I heard it and it resonates with them. Thank you for sharing that, Courtney. It is now time to get into our Fast Five. Are you ready, Courtney?
I'm ready.
All right. Number one, what advice would you give to our investors today with helping them get started?
Absolutely. It's what I wear on my shirt. It says, how you do real estate matters. And it's kind of twofold. The first one is, it's the technical side, how you do deals, which is really ultimately like, how do you structure them? What type of financing? How do you buy them? All of those things, because I see so many people get into bad deals, which is where that sounding board really helps, right? That's what I did my first few deals. I found someone who was just, further down the road. And I said, hey, give me advice on this deal. Yeah. But then the second part of that was, it's how you do it. It's more so the moral and how you treat people, because at the end of the day, look, go solve some problems. At the end of the day, I have done a lot of the deals that I own as rentals are fantastic deals, and they were found by solving problems for other people.
There you go. Go solve problems, y'all. It's literally the secret of it all. Go solve some problems. All right. Number two, Courtney, do you have any YouTube or podcast shows that you would recommend our listeners check out?
Cash Flow Depot. I know that's not necessarily a podcast or a YouTube channel. That's a big one that I recommend. I'm a fan of old school, Bigger Pockets, like the first one to like 200, 300 episodes.
Amen.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I did. I listened like starting from number 1 through, if you guys want. So the local real estate investor club I have, we literally, 2018, we started putting a camera up and filming each of the actual meetings. And so a big part to that, I always tell people, I'm happy to adopt you into my RIA. You can go on our YouTube channel and watch them. We have, I don't know at this point, a significant amount of videos. So if you go to Courtney10k.com, the top right link is our YouTube channel. It's the North Shore Real Estate Investors Association on YouTube. You can go watch that. Tons of videos. I do a handful of trainings on there, but it's predominantly other people, and it's a no pitch. It's a no pitch RIA, so it's not like someone's like barely giving you any information so that they can. It's behind a paywall. No, tons of information on there.
I love it. I love it. We're going to get that link put in our show notes, listeners. So if you're driving or whatnot, don't worry. Don't try to jot that down. It'll be in the show notes. All right. Number 3, Courtney, if you had to pick one book that you feel has made the biggest impact on your success, what would that book be?
So obviously, for those of you who are watching and not just listening, I have a significant amount of books behind me to the tune of 2,500. It's a problem, I know. But so most of the time people say this is probably hard for you to answer. It's actually not. I very clearly, very directly went to one book. So for those of you who are looking, it is The Go-Giver.
I love that book.
Yeah, I have read this book. I usually read it once a quarter. So The Go-Giver, it's by Burg and David Mann. And this book, it's super small. It's written in a story format. So I tell everyone, even if you don't like to read, you can read it or go listen to it. And it's such a powerful, powerful story. I reread it once a quarter, like I said, and it's the number 1 book that I give away.
When Tiffany and I were writing our book, we were searching for books that we wanted to model ours after. We had our own story to tell, but we wanted to model our book after something that we thought was very good and compelling. And there were 2 books that we loosely based our strategy on. And one is The Latte Factor by David Bach, I think his name is. And the other one was The Go-Giver. So that was surprising. I'm glad you brought that. I got a little chill when you brought it up. I'm like, yes.
I love it. It's such a powerful book.
It very much so is. All right, Courtney, number 4, what do you feel has been the secret sauce to your success?
Yeah, look, a lot of people are like, Courtney, how'd you do it? I've done, a few hundred deals over the last 2 years, and they're like, how'd you do it? All this stuff. Honestly, I really believe it's my staying power, and it's basically sticking with it. And too many people quit too early. It's that, 3 feet from gold concept. It's like, you put in all this work. So we mentioned Johnston earlier. Very early on, he looked me dead in the eyes, grabbed me by the shoulder, said, Courtney, I was talking to him about like, I was struggling, I think, through some things. Maybe it's the idea of how I was keeping my salary low, doing all this work, and he just looked at me and said, Courtney, give your efforts time to compound. And a big part of that is if you quit early, you stop that snowball from forming and getting larger. And so that's a huge part to it. So I've always said it's my staying power.
Yeah, amen to that. And number 5, Courtney, before we end this show, how can our listeners get in touch with you and follow you on your journey?
Sure thing. Look, guys, I'd love to connect with you on social media. Courtney10k.com. That is a digital business card for me. So it has my various socials. And so Instagram, you can follow me on there, message me on there. I share a lot of like the day-to-day on there, especially if you like to read. I kind of go over some of the books. I recently got back on Twitter because we were talking earlier. I'm a big fan of like reading, from the old school guys. I've got a handful of the binders I'm going through from some of the old seminars. I like to put little one-liners on my Twitter and kind of as a way for me to digest what I'm learning. So check with me on the various social media sites. I'd love to connect with you guys.
Can they use that same at Courtney Fricke right there?
Yeah. So So on my Twitter and on Instagram, if you go to Courtney10k.com, it has me for like TikTok, Instagram, my Facebook, like all the different socials on there.
All right, y'all. Courtney, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. And I know for sure somebody out there is going to be touched by this and it's going to change their life. And I'm just so thankful you came on the show today. Thank you.
Eric, look, it's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And when I'm in New Orleans again, I'm calling and we'll go get some gumbo, we'll get some etouffee, and we'll go talk real estate.
Hey, look, you can make it a tax write-off. Come down here and we'll go show you some properties or something.
Let's make it happen. Thank you, Courtney.
Sure thing.
Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Head over to onpurposeinvestor.com and sign up for our newsletter to get all the latest updates. If you haven't already, we'd really appreciate an honest review wherever you watch our podcast. All right, now go smash that subscribe and follow button for more tips on building your dream life. See you next week, Pathfinders.